Imagine a world in which governments have wealth, serious savings of wealth, just like individuals. It's the sort of thing that philosophers and economists have been hoping to achieve for several centuries since Adam Smith first talked about this idea of funds that are peculiar to the sovereign. Well, in the last 10 years, we've seen the establishment of exactly that. Sovereign wealth funds across more than 60 countries around the world now. Government-owned wealth that can be used to help the citizens. My project is going to look at who owns the state. In the last decade, we have seen a resurgence of the owner state. We have seen the state take on more debt in the terms of bailing out the private sector and emergency sovereign debt issuance, but we've also seen the creation of major new wealth holding entities in the form of sovereign wealth funds. My project wants to ask, how do we distribute the benefits and the burden of these new assets and liabilities that the state owns? So in trying to answer these questions, I'm going to split the project into 3 phases. The first phase is going to be looking at public ownership in theory. So right from Hobbes's theory of the state as a person through to some of our property theorists that have looked at different ways we can collectively own assets, I want to try and get to terms with how people have thought about the way we share ownership over collective and public property. We can also look to examples throughout history like the French Revolution, where pamphleteers talked a lot about who owned the national debt in France right before the revolution. We can look to the US, to the Federalist Papers, where the same question about who owns the national debt was tackled. So we have a lot of resources in the history of political thought to try to help us start to answer these questions. In the second year of the project, I then want to look at public ownership in practice. This is going to involve going into central banks, sovereign wealth funds, into treasuries, and sitting down with people who are actually managing the state finances and asking them, how do you actually manage the accounts of the nation? How do you treat wealth, and how do you treat the flow of the public finances in the national budgets? And once we start to get a picture of actually what can the state own and how is it being treated, we can see whether our ideas in the history of political thought and in political philosophy can help us understand the way states are currently managing their new assets and liabilities. The final stage of the project will look to make both an academic contribution and a public policy contribution. On the academic side, I'd like to be able to offer a contemporary theory of public ownership, which political theorists and political scientists can draw upon to answer other pressing public policy questions. On the policy side, I'd like to be able to go to governments and say, here is how my theory can help you with the management of these new assets and liabilities, in particular in order to benefit the citizens of your countries.